Hello, hello, all of you fellow fans of Christopher Manson's infamous book, Maze. This is Bill M., and I'm back with commentary number 26. In this commentary, I want to talk about rooms 25, 34, 10, and 41 as well. And you'll see how these rooms relate to each other and why I have 41 separate from the rest. So let's get into it. First, we got to start with some of the obligatory recap, because there's always at least one newcomer with these videos. Remember that the main goal of Christopher Manson's maze is to find the shortest path from room 1 to the center of the maze, which is room 45, and back. We know what the solution is. The publisher confirmed that solution back in the mid-1980s when there was a contest for this. Now, this also means that most of the rooms in the book are not on the shortest path. But since every room has some clue to help you pick the right door, well, we assume that these other rooms still have some correct door that will get you back on the right path in the quickest amount of time. There are some trap rooms where that is impossible. But there are, however, 19 loop rooms in Maze. And these have no direct path to 45, but they do have a definitive path to get back to room 1 and start over. And you can see commentary number 25 of mine for more general maps, cheats, if you will, about exiting the loop. So the rooms near the end of the loop, which I have not covered yet, are rooms 25, 34, 10, and 14. So in this commentary, we'll look at clues from the pictures, the dialogue, and also the 1994 CD-ROM game, Riddle of the Maze. And of course, I have to say, please give this clip a like if you enjoy this commentary, maybe even subscribe. All right, let's start with room 25. The dialogue goes as follows. A high room with the image of a crown on the wall for everyone to see now. Though one of my parents might be low-born, the other was close to a king. I've always felt at home here. Which door ought we take, they wanted to know. I rather brusquely indicated the 3 doors. Any of these is fine for my purposes. They were disconcerted at the apparent lack of clues. Perhaps in another room, they said. Leaving 4. Let's take a quick look at room 25. Well, on the CD-ROM game, remember that the 1994 CD-ROM game adaptation of Maze, called Riddle of the Maze. In that game, we are told that certain objects are important and become alive when you click on them. So we assume that, maybe they might be related to the clues. Well, for room 25, the CD-ROM game, clicking on the crown makes all of the man pictures above animate through each scene until they all go dark. So each one subsequently goes to the next one and they all go dark. It's kind of like watching a zoetrope, little scenes you put in a circle and then you look at them on a record player or something spinning around so it gets a little animated, something like that. Anyway, we do find in this dialogue some biographical details of the guide, but as I've said many times before, that's not something I'm really interested in. Maybe after we talk about all the rooms, I'll explore this idea of who the guide is and so on. Now, the third door, the door at the crown, is a one-way exit from room 42. And the room that leaves from there to 25 is the one with the fruit, the pear on it. So we have 3 exits we can actually take, 34, 13, and 35. Exits 13, that's the 13 room with the sundial, and 35, that's that basement closet with only one exit. Well, those take us deeper into the loop, so the correct door, the best door we can take here is 34. And there isn't much to this room. This is one of the rooms in Maze, probably the room in Maze with the least amount of details to it. There's not a lot here. There's the portraits, there's the crown, there's the sign that's on the ground. Is there anything else really notable about this room? Well, I would say if you look more closely at the vertical pieces of wood that make up the doors, from left to right, they have 6, 6, 7, and 6 vertical pieces of wood. That one with the crown has 1 extra piece. Curiously enough, some fans have pointed out that the sum of all of these is 25, which is the current room. But again, otherwise, there doesn't seem to be much else to observe in this room, and it's even hinted at in the dialogue. So having said that, are there any clues in this room? Well, to me, the seemingly obvious clue is that the portraits get worse as you go from left to right. Therefore, the door to take is the one that's on the far left, the door to 34. It's kind of like in room 26 where you have the devils on stage and the devils pop out more and more as you go to the right. And curiously enough, the correct door to take in that room is all the way to the left. So other than that, we get back to the question that I urged. Instead of trying to find ways to justify clues, maybe think instead of, okay, if I was the author of this book, how would I encode the exit to 34 as a clue? Would I use the number 34 somewhere? Okay, well, if that's the case, all the exits have a 3 in them, but only 34 has a 4. So maybe there are clues with 4? So some proposed clues that I've seen is, the board in front of the third door has 4 nails on the bottom sticking out. That's 3 and 4, so take 34. Other people have pointed out these 7 portraits along the top. In the first 3, the man looks kind of calm. The 4 is where things get scary, so 3 and 4. The crown door is referred to in the text, and that has 7 boards instead of 6. So some people say, well, 7, that's 3 plus 4. None of the others add up to 7, so that's another indication to take 34. So some of these might be legitimate clues the author put in or something kind of close to what he intended. But let's take a look at some other things about 25. Some things I've noticed, if we take a little closer look in the dialogue, they say, which door ought we take? I indicated the 3 doors. Any of these is fine for my purposes. So 3 doors for my purposes. We do know that there are other rooms in Maze where the author does put in some kind of puns or some wordplay. That certainly happens a lot. So maybe that's another clue. But remember, we're not necessarily trying to find one definitive clue. As we are explicitly told in the directions, there are any number of clues in every room to help you choose the right door. So, as we've seen in examining other rooms, there's quite often more than one clue the author put in there. So, other ways to hide 34, I was thinking, well, what about Roman numerals? Because that seems to show up in some rooms. Some of the rooms we looked at, clues, seemed like pretty plausible. So, 34 would be XXXIV. Is there like an X? Well, if we look in the crown, zoom in, we can kind of see X's on that. It's much easier to see in the book. But I don't know about I and a V. Maybe you could say the points are kind of like V's, but it gets to a lot of stretching, I think, to try to justify 34. What other rooms have a crown in them? Well, I know 33 and 16 have crowns, whether that helps us, whether there might be further clues in there to help us point in the right direction here. I don't really see it, but just something I would throw out there. Now, one thing in this dialogue is the word felt, and felt is an anagram for left. And remember, again, we know Christopher Manson does put in puns and things like that and anagrams in some of the clues. We know that for sure. But to take this a little bit further, if you read the paragraphs and then look at the doors from right to left, they describe it as a high room, and then they talk about a crown, and then the author says relative being lowborn, and then saying he felt at home. Well, if you look at the doors from right to left, which is following the the calmer portrait order, high room, well, the highest number is 35. Then there's a crown. They mentioned crown. Lowborn, well, the lowest number of the exits is 13. Felt at home, 34. You do end up taking 34 to go home. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this anagram felt as we talk about the next room, 34. Let's get to room 34. Room 34. A middle-class drawing room or parlor. It was amazing how much more comfortable they felt in these surroundings. Everyone sat down, some on the floor, and chatted about where they had been, where they should go. Magpies, I said to myself, not a real thought in their heads. They were so much at ease, they almost missed what the room was telling them altogether. They finally got the message, which I thought was pretty obvious, and we went on to... I have a lot to say about this room, so bear with me. As always, I give chapter breaks in the description. If you really want to fast forward or rewind, hear something again, whatever. So, first of all, the CD-ROM game animations. Are there any for Room 34? Yeah, the eyes of the potato blink. They close and open. And the Viking ship and the painting rocks back and forth, and the eye blinks. That's on the ship. So, looking at the exits, well, we only have two choices in this room. We can either take 10 or 25. We just came from room 25, so it seems the logical choice is to just go through 10. It is possible, however, I will add that you can come to room 34 from room 42. There is a one-way exit that's here in room 34. It's the door that says no and has no doorknob on it. That's a one-way door from room 42. So if you did that, you might not know which door from here to take. We do see the cane pointing to door 25, and door 25 has a yes on it. So you might think at first, oh, that must be the correct door. But as we've kind of learned through lots of other rooms in Maze, no, that's a little too obvious. And if anything, objects that point to doors almost always are pointing to the wrong doors. So this is another room, by the way, with a human, but the human isn't referred to at all. You know, we see the back of a human walking out through the door to 25. There's some other rooms with humans in 29, 36, 16, and so on. We see that the human here, it's a little easier to see in the book than in the picture here, but he is wearing a hat and leaving. Though again, this time there's no mention of the human at all in the text. When it comes to what clues are in the room to tell us to go take the door to 10, I have seen many, some a little more probable to me than others, but let me just give you a bunch of them. Some people have said, oh, the ship's mast in the eye or the space make a 1 and a 0. Okay, but as I've shown here, couldn't you equally say that if you trace the lines this way, you get a 2 and a 5 shape, and therefore take 25. And this is the problem that I see all the time with proposed clues for Maze. It's like, okay, can't you take that same kind of reasoning you just gave, though, and find something in the room to justify the wrong door? Because if you can, it's probably a case of what you found not being a real clue, and you're just trying to justify the answer after the fact. Some people said, okay, the couch's arm and the pillow look like a 1 and a 0. Okay, I can see that a little better. Though I do have to wonder if one might argue, well, that curl on the top makes it kind of look like a 2, and we do see 5 stripes on the pillow, including the center. So could somebody rationalize that as 25? Yeah, maybe that's more of a stretch. But, okay. I think the arm and the pillow may be a subtle clue for 10. Some people have pointed out that yes, maybe a no, when you add them all up, you get 10 letters. I also read somewhere in Into the Abyss, somebody proposed, like, oh, they're sitting on the floor, so that draws our attention to the floor. And if we look, there are 10 feet that are on the floor when you count the chair and the couch and that. And I tried adding them up, and I don't really see where they're getting that. I've also heard somebody say, well, they say magpies, and that's a reference to this 1700s fortune-telling device with a poem that references 10. Okay, maybe that was a little thing the author put in there, but not something I think the author would expect people to understand as a clue. Other people pointed out, well, the yes sign, it may be on that door to 25, but notice it's parallel with the 10 sign, and likewise the maybe sign is parallel with the 25 sign. Okay. I've also heard people say, well, yes, maybe, and no. The no doorway doesn't have a person in it. The yes doorway has a person. The maybe could have a person behind it if we walk through it, or maybe there's somebody behind the door we don't know. So that's what those signs refer to. Okay, maybe. Let's look at some other things. What follows on this slide is the most widely accepted clue as to how to pick 10. All right, there are several things that indicate the word needle. So we see this sign that's over on the left, jibe, pine, compass. The rationalization for the clue is that, okay, well, jibe, sometimes that's spelled with a G, is an insulting quip. He says magpies, and sometimes that's also called a needle. Pine, well, you think of pine needles. Pine is a type of tree with needles. Compass, well, a compass is a device that has a needle. And over on the other side of the room, we see an obelisk in a painting. Well, needle is also another word for an obelisk. Some people have tried to propose, well, this is more specifically Cleopatra's needle, this particular obelisk. I don't see it really having any resemblance to that if you compare the photos with that. And if you do look in the dictionary, you see that another meaning of needle is an obelisk. And likewise, there are several clues here that point to the word eye or eyes. So we see a cane on the ground with a tag on it that says quick. Well, quick is another word for hurry. And so the quick cane is actually a hurricane. A hurricane. A hurricane has an eye, the eye of the hurricane. And on the chair, we see a picture of a potato. Well, a potato has eyes. Marks on a potato are commonly called eyes. And of course, we see the ship that's in the painting as we look up above there. That ship has an eye. I've seen some other people argue that if you look at the end of the maybe sign and the beginning of the yes sign, those kind of line up. You get the word eyes. Okay. Some other people are saying, well, the pillow is an eye because it looks kind of like an eye. No, it doesn't. It's a bunch of concentric squares. So, since we have a bunch of needle references and we have a bunch of eye references, it refers to the eye of the needle. Needle being the numeral 1, eye being like a numeral 0, or you're threading a needle. So that is how you get room 10 out of it. Well, one of my objections to this is that it seems like a complex way to encode the word 10, in my opinion. But I don't have any better answers as to what these items in the room mean. And like I said, this is widely accepted as the clue. Maybe there are more than one clues, but it's widely accepted as the definitive clue for this room for picking 10. Having said that, though, I think you can take this a little further. Jibe, pine, and compass actually have multiple meanings. So it's not to say that all those meanings I just talked about in the previous slide are incorrect or invalid. But if you look at the dictionary, you can find different meanings of these words, additional meanings. Jibe can be a verb. And if it's taken as a verb, here's one entry I found. It described it as to change a vessel's course when sailing with the wind so that the stern passes through the eye of the wind. The boom swings to the opposite side. So you can look up descriptions of this, websites where they talk about jibe and as a verb and a way to steer things through the wind and so on, steer a little boat or a ship with a sail. Pine, we took that as a noun, but pine can also be a verb. One of the definitions is a painful longing or yearning, pining for something. And compass can even be a verb, too. In the dictionary, it says to devise or contrive often with skill or craft, to plot, to encompass, to achieve, to obtain, to comprehend. Compass as a noun, well, of course, there's the magnetic compass with the needle, but there's also a drawing compass, and that does have a needle of sorts on one end, and it draws circles. Now, needle also can mean to heckle or to prod or goad somebody in a particular direction. So if you think about it, here we are, we're stuck in the loop. It's kind of like a circle, and we're longing to get out. We're longing to take some action. We're learning to steer out, kind of jibe our way out against the odds. So I think that all reinforces the clue, the meaning of these words. Now, I did also wonder, okay, we're told that this is a drawing room or parlor. I've heard the term sewing room sometimes refer to old living rooms as sewing rooms. Could that apply here? Maybe not. I thought maybe it might be another, eye through the needle reference. Sewing rooms are usually defined as having sewing equipment in them. Maybe it is an old word for a living room, drawing room that evolved. I don't know. Just a speculation as we're looking for things that match up with eye and needle. So even though everybody pretty much agrees with that whole eye and needle thing, and that's what those objects mean, and that's how you get number 10 out of the whole thing by looking at the numerals, are there any other clues in the room that might indicate taking the door to 10? Well, just as with the previous room, we find the word felt in here. That's an anagram for left, and once again, we take the door to the left. Now, if you search the entire book of Maze, the word felt only shows up in 3 rooms, 25, 34, and 11. And in all of those cases, if you look at them, we should be taking the door to the left. So I don't think this is really a coincidence. And it begs the question, well, if you can get the word left from felt, can you get something to get the word right? Well, no, R-I-G-H-T, right, doesn't have an anagram. I suppose you could try finding homophones like right, R-I-T-E, tire, but the only room I can think of with a tire has a door and you don't go to the right. There may be other similar anagrams like this hidden in rooms. I've tried making anagrams of combinations like first door or starboard or other directions like that. I can't really find any of them in other rooms, though, that kind of definitively point to a clue. Now, room 25, though, where we were with those portraits on the wall, they were disappointed about the apparent lack of clues, and they said, perhaps in another room. Well, we come here to room 34 from there, and we take the maybe door. Maybe is another thing for perhaps. So they're talking about clues, and they say, perhaps in another room. Yeah, maybe that's a clue. Now, I noticed the couch pattern is a loud thing with stripes. It's 2 colors. And I wonder, is that maybe another reference to binary numbers, 1 and 0? Talk about magpies. We want to say it as a quip, but magpies are black and white birds too. So maybe the 2 tones of the couch, the alternating colors there, the magpie reference, black and white. Is this kind of reinforcing the yes-no reinforcement? 1-0? I don't know. As for that sign, jibe, pine, compass, I did try looking at some point for anagrams of that. I think it was one of the first things I did when I had the book and was going through it. Have not been able to really find anything with that. I do have one final thought about room 34. Now, this is my own crazy rabbit hole idea, but hear me out. Could room 34 be a reference in many ways to television? Because they talk about, well, the group came in and they sat down, they felt comfortable gathering around, sitting on the floor, some sitting on the couch and so on. It sounds kind of like a bunch of people gathering around to watch TV. Remember, this book came out in 1985, and that's usually what people were doing. And of course, there were, to this day, there's a big battle of you should be reading books and not watching TV. And the author does say, well, not a real thought in their heads, calling them magpies. That does sound something like an intellectual book would like to say against watching television, especially in 1985. We do see the potato on the chair. Is that a reference to couch potato? Well, probably if that was the intent, it would probably be on the couch instead. But same pattern there on the chair. So a couch potato, slang term for somebody who sits on the couch and watches TV all day. And that is a term people would have known in 1985. On a side note, with the chair, it has these 4 legs in front, and I have no idea why that is. You would think that that was done on purpose to denote a clue. And it's certainly not drawn from the perspective of, 2 legs in the front and 2 legs in the back, because we've seen Manson draw chairs, and he can certainly draw them. So that looks certainly purposely drawn with that. Is it kind of mimicking 2 people sitting side by side on the TV being couch potatoes? I don't know. But also notice that across from the couch is the table, and on that table is where the TV would be. Maybe it is there and out of view. And going back to the couch pattern with that alternating thing, it looks kind of like TV static or test pattern. The obelisk, like a TV antenna. We see this weird V-shaped pattern in the wallpaper. I have no idea what that might mean, related to TV or otherwise. I've read some people propose, say, oh, it means pointing down, and then we look at the floor and so on. I don't know. They missed what the room was telling them. Well, maybe it was telling them to get off the couch and go outside. So, those are just some of my thoughts about there. Maybe there is kind of a television theme there. Maybe I'm just reading things into it that aren't there. Regardless, not sure how you would get 10 or get the left exit out of this. Were there 10 channels on TV back in the day? No, there were more than that, even outside of cable. So I don't think that's it. Anyway, that's more than enough time I think we've spent on 34. Let's move on. We take the exit from 34 to room 10, and this is where we end up. Room 10. A room that smelled of paint. Faint voices, apparently in an argument, came from behind the locked door. You know, said one, that sounds like us in there. They tried the door, but naturally it wouldn't open. The voices stopped when the door knob rattled. One picked up the umbrella. It may rain where we're going. I signaled my approval, and after a short rest, we came to... Let's take a closer look at room 10. So on the CD-ROM game, as for animations, well, the volcano flashes and makes an eruption noise. If you click on the two dancer paintings, they each animate, they dance a little bit, stop. So out of the exits here, 34, 41, and 14, we just came from room 34. Room 14, if you go there, only has trap rooms and an exit back to 10. And I'll talk more about 14 later. So room 41 is the door we take, and this room goes to the chutes and ladders room, 41, and that is the end of the loop. That is the room we take to get back to room 1. There was an exit in 41 back to room 1. I've talked in a previous commentary about the chutes and ladders room. So we see an umbrella here. I've talked a little bit about umbrellas before. It's kind of a recurring theme. It says it may rain where we're going. Well, curiously enough, none of the exits lead to an outside room where they might have to worry about rain. Room 3 has a top-headed man in the center right there, almost in the same kind of position, if you might remember room 3. The stick man, but yeah, still looks kind of like a dancing man with a top hat. And as for the actual man in the top hat in the portrait that is in room 10, that, as I've said in a previous commentary number 14 on the CD-ROM game, that is also the logo that was chosen for the CD-ROM game company, curiously enough. Now, you might think, okay, well, if that's 41 and 14 on this side, and this is 34 and a blank, is that blank sign 43? Well, as I've said many times before, first of all, if it's not a numbered door, you can't go through it. But the blank door is not 43. It's actually a one-way exit from room 37, because that's the only other room aside from these ones you see here that has an exit back to room 10. Now, amusingly enough, if you go to room 37, which is the room with the big shapes, the giant cone, and so on, there's a dialogue in there. And in the dialogue say they were close to splitting up when there was a rattling sound and one of the doors was shaken from the other side. They all stopped talking and moved closer together. So it's an amusing thing where in 37 they're arguing and then there's a rattle on the door and they all shut up. And then here in room 10, they talk about saying, hey, that sounds like us arguing on the other side of the door. And then they try the doorknob and then everybody from the other room shuts up. So I think it's a little playful thing about how time works in the maze and so on. There's some kind of weird time loop going on. Regardless, going from 37 here to room 10 is not the right way to go, even from 37. Are there any clues here in room 10 to take the door to 41? Well, frankly, I'm still kind of stumped in that I've read a bunch of proposed clues and I've kind of come up with some of my own, but I haven't really found something that was really satisfactory. And again, it doesn't mean that there's only one definitive clue. There may be several things, maybe several small things you have to look at and consider. Now, one thing that many people point out is say, oh, well, the umbrella points right to the door, and so does that baton that's on top of the ladder. That's true, but as I've said, in almost all the other rooms in Maze, usually something pointing to a door indicates the wrong door. So I'm thinking, okay, there must be some other kind of clues in here. I've likewise heard people say, oh, the 4-poster bed and then one umbrella, that's 4 in 1. Okay, but why is it 4 in 1 and not 1 in 4? Because you could take 1 and 4, and that says 14, and go through 14, but that's not the right door. Or for that matter, people have pointed out the trefoil, that clover kind of shape at the base of the bed. Why don't you say that and the 4 posters make 3 and 4 and go through 34? Or why don't you say, hey, there's 3 sticks on top of the ladder, the 2 paintbrushes and the baton, and the ladder has 4 legs, 4 long legs. So yeah, you go out 34. Again, the problem of trying to rationalize things with what's there. I've heard some people say, oh, well, they say they pick up the umbrella and they say it may rain. Well, they're talking about the paint that's dripping down from that sign that was freshly painted, as you can see. I don't know. Still seems like a bit of a stretch to me. And also, it looks to me like that paint is there getting ready to paint the blank sign, or it already painted the other ones anyway. And at the end of the dialogue, they pick up the umbrella and the narrator says, I signaled my approval. And I've seen some people say, well, signal approval, that means nod. And nod rhymes with odd, and you take the odd number. Okay, still seems like a stretch. I saw somebody also say, well, they rattle the door. So there's a rattle from the door and there's a ladder. Well, rattle and ladder, you think of snakes and ladders. And 41 is the snakes and ladders room, or the chutes and ladders room. Okay. Interesting. Some other people have pointed out, well, if you look at some of these other objects, like the pillow, one is kind of up, one is kind of down. The dancers each have a leg up and down. The suitcase is one up and one down. The sheet folded over up and down. The volcano goes up and down, spewing the ash. And likewise, 41 has an open and closed door, so there's some kind of duality going on there, therefore take 41. I don't know about that. Maybe it is, though, another chutes and ladders reference, going up and down with all these things. Some more plausible things I've seen, and this was pointed out in Mazecast, this is where I first heard it, I first saw a reference to it, is that if you look closely at the objects, you can see 4s and 1s in somewhere. Again, we got the problem with 14 being another option too, but if we look at the ladder, look at the shape on the side, we see kind of like a backwards 4, and then next to the other slant, that's a 1. Now, if we look at the shadow under the ladder, if we turn that 90 degrees and kind of stretch it out, we do see what looks like a 41. So I do think that's a plausible clue. Other people have said the dancers, with the way they're bending their legs, is kind of like a 4, and with the arms up or some other aspect of it, you kind of get a 1 with a stroke out of there. And also people have pointed out, well, the suitcases, if you look at that, the strap of the hat box looks kind of like a 4, and the single suitcase next to it looks kind of like a 1 in that sense. So some of these are a bit of a stretch, but I do think there is some credibility here with they may be indications of 4 and 1, and definitively 41, I think, at least with the shadow. Like I said, I don't necessarily have some great ideas for this. I haven't really found something that feels like in my gut it is kind of a real credible clue, aside from some of the ones I mentioned. Well, we do have a top hat here, in at least in the man in the picture. And top hats are a thing that do show up here and there in Maze in a number of rooms. I've noticed that usually a top hat relates to the correct door. But this is one of the two exceptions, rooms 10 and room 42. We see the top hat here. Well, it's in the picture that's closer to 14, and 14 is not actually the right door. Now, here are some other ideas I have, and again, just random ideas I'm going to throw out there as long as I'm making a commentary clip about room 10. The ballet dancer that's in that portrait, that's in a position when they stand on their toes called point position, or pointe, as it's supposed to be pronounced, I guess, in French. Maybe I'm upsetting a lot of French people here. Sorry if that's the case, but anyway. If you think of point, well, that's pointing downwards, and we get the point from the baton of the dancer below, which is pointing towards the bed. The umbrella is pointing there towards 41. The baton there is pointing to 41. So going around the room, you kind of get the pointing there. I do wonder if point or point might be relation to paint. Is there some kind of relation there? Paint and pointing. Some say the ballet spin is a reference to 41, that if you go to 41, you end up coming back out. So kind of like revolving door. Now, some anagrams. I did notice it talks about the smell of paint, and odor is an anagram for door. So I did wonder if, okay, maybe odor and something else points to this door, like third door, door 41 or something like that. Paint odor is an anagram for inapt door, but that would kind of indicate the wrong door, inapt. The door near the paint is the correct one. I also noticed 41. Is that an anagram for anything? I got not foyer, and, well, we did just come from a living room. You can argue that's not a real foyer or entrance hall. Now, another thing I've noticed about this on the whole is that it looks like it's a hotel theme. Because you got the bed and the suitcases here. Now, what does that mean? Could it mean you're coming here to the end of your travel, out of the loop? And I thought, okay, the volcano plus the ladder frame, hot is like an L, hotel there. Again, just random ideas that I had tried coming up with as I tried examining things in 10 for clues. One final set of observations I want to share about room 10. Again, I think back to the question, okay, well, if I was an author of this book, how would I hide 41? How would I encode that? Well, there are things implying 4 and 1, but the problem with that, again, is that you could get 1 and 4 out of that. And we know we don't want to go through 14, we want to go through 41. I'm thinking, okay, 41 is a prime number, so you're not going to really get too many easy calculations of common numbers that are going to give you that. I thought 41. Well, what about FOR1? As in, I, for one, believe this. Is there any kind of indication of that in the dialogue, or kind of hint at that? Not really. So I did think, okay, what about Roman numerals? XLI would be 41. Well, if we do look at the stepladder, turn that to the side, kind of get that, an XL and I. Okay. One thing I've not found a good answer for is what the volcano is there. It was animated in the CD-ROM, so it's supposed to be important. Does it indicate danger? Well, no. 34 is not a trap room. Some have pointed out that the paint can and the brushes are in kind of similar pose as the lava. So if you look closely at the volcano, it has like 1 spark to the left and then 3 going up over to the right. And that looks kind of like the end of the baton on the left, and then the 2 paintbrushes, another end of baton on the right. Okay, not sure what we can get out of that. Now, lava, of course, is hot. Is this one of those getting warmer signs? Well, maybe, in the sense that we are near the end of the loop. We are really hot and almost getting back to room 1, only a couple more rooms away. But 34 is not the way to go. If we look at room 3, there's a furnace where we need to go. In 18, there's a fireplace closer to the door where we have to take. So no, it can't be one of those getting warmer things in that sense, as being near that door. Again, CD-ROM says it's important, but I can't say I really got anything. I did notice that in the corner of the bed, maybe this is, maybe I'm just seeing things here. It looks kind of like a raven, maybe a fish. No, probably more like a raven that's in like the pattern of the bed. Again, maybe I'm just seeing things, but that's all I've got on room 10. That's all I have to share with you on that. Let's move on to the final room in this commentary. We're supposed to go through 41, and from there we can get back to 1. We just came from 34, so what happens if we take that exit to 14? Let's look at room 14. One of the biggest rooms in the house. All 3 doorways were dark. Afraid to go out? I asked. Since they tried to think of themselves as adults, they didn't care for my question. Not really, said the thoughtful one, but that doesn't mean we have to go running around out there just to prove something to you. I knew she would bear watching. Choose then, I cried as if my feelings were hurt. Pay no attention to anything I say. I knew they couldn't afford not to listen to me entirely. They were so easily led. Turning around, the group took a path that completely surprised me after all, and I followed them too. In room 14, we only have 3 choices, and 2 of them are trap rooms. 43 and 24 are trap rooms. So what we really need to do is run back to room 10. Now, some of the trivia bits about 14. 14 is one of only 4 rooms in Maze that have only 1 entrance. So those 4 rooms are this one, 14, the big room, the one and only entrance in the entire book that gets us to 14 is that exit we just took from room 10. Another room is 26, the Stage Devils. The only entrance in the entire book to room 26 is in room 1. 32, the Go Back Room. I talked about that in commentary number 7. There is one and only one entrance to there. That's in room 28. 39, the Wine Cellar, one and only entrance to that room, and that's from room 12. And I talked about that in commentary 12. Now, all 4 of those rooms do have an exit back to the respective entrance room. And out of those 4, 3 of them are path rooms. The one that we're in now, 14, is a loop room. And 2 of those, though, 26 and 39, are both on the shortest path. Now, about room 14, let's get back to room 14. Are there any CD-ROM animations? Well, there are sparks and a buzzing sound that come out of that giant plug on the upper right. So again, we kind of already know from having mapped the rooms and kind of knowing about the nature of them that the definitive correct door has to be 10. Are there any clues to indicate 10? Well, one clue in general, I think that the big plug is plugging up the outlet, so there is no outlet left. So I think that's a reference to no outlet. Doesn't mean the same thing as dead end. It means there's only one way out, and that is the way you came in. So I think that is a clue to take 10 back, because once again, there is no other way to get into room 14 unless you came in from room 10. I've seen some people point out that choose then kind of sounds like choose 10. Choose then also has 10 letters, and there are also 10 words I noticed in that sentence. Other people have pointed out there are additional 10 references in the text. Pay no attention. Listen. Those both have T-E-N in there. Now, I noticed that like room 40, you have kind of like a mouse or rat or rodent theme here. Room 40 is the one that looks like a giant cage. And here we kind of see a mouse theme. We see the stereotypical mouse holes like you see in Tom and Jerry in the walls. So I think this is kind of reinforcing the theme of, yeah, you're rats trapped in a maze. Now we come to the question again, how would I encode 10 if I was doing this? Well, 10, like 10 fingers, maybe like that. Well, we do see a table leg that has fingers on them. Maybe that's one way to encode 10. Some people have pointed out that the words turning around are at the end of the dialogue, so yeah, literally turn around and take 10. Yeah, that might be the clue, though I would point out that there are some other rooms that have similar references to turning around or turning back, and in those cases, you don't actually turn back from where you came necessarily. Those would be rooms 33 and 3. Some others have pointed out that the narrator says, afraid to go out, meaning stay underneath. Notice we just came from 10. 10 is kind of under the table from our perspective. So don't go out, stay here under 10 where it's safe. Over on the right, we do see what looks like a painted target, and we do see a paper clip with string coming out of 24. So I'm assuming the target refers to 43. The paper clip on string refers to 24. And again, we don't want either of those. So the target, maybe that's another omen, painted target. If you're going there's a painted target, not a bullseye in a good way, bullseye in a bad way. With 24, I mean, some people have said, oh, that's a trap that people use for rats to put a paperclip on the end. I don't know about that. But with the string and the thing on the end, I mean, it does kind of look like a trap in that sense. Otherwise, I'm not really sure about what the paperclip and the string might be. I tried finding anagrams for those. Is it maybe a reference, another pun, getting clipped? Could be. But that is all I have about room 14. Again, you just go back to room 10. And, of course, 10, take 41, and then you're able to get out of the loop and go back to room 1. That is going to do it for commentary number 26. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.